Welcome back, everybody. We will be discussing what plants grow best in which system between the Gardyn, the Iharvest, and the Lettuce Grow Farmstand, and also why some plants grow better in one system over the other system. Before you pick a system that you want to buy, you need to know what you want to grow in the system. Not all systems grow the same. Most people won't think about this before hopping online, ordering some fancy looking system that they know absolutely nothing about. Before we dive deep into this, there's 4 key topics we need to discuss. After I tell you the 4 topics, we'll discuss each one of them until you understand them. The first thing we'll discuss is root size. The bigger the root system, the bigger the plant, the bigger the harvest. The next will be root zone oxygen. Plants need oxygen in the root zone. Which systems will have the best oxygen in the root zone? The third subject will be plant spacing and airflow. Plants need enough space to get air between the leaves and not to be overcrowded. More spaces in the system is not always a better thing if it causes overcrowded plants. And the fourth thing we'll be discussing is support for the plants, like a trellis system. Bigger plants like peppers and tomatoes need support. As you can see, I'm out in my garage shooting this video. So I don't have a garden system on me right now since they're all in my house. So we have the Lettuce Grow Farmstand with no lights on it. And here's the Iharvest. If you need me to shoot some additional video footage of the garden system, I can, so you can understand it a little bit better, what I'm discussing here. So now it's time to talk about topic number 1, plant root size. These 2 units behind me both have plenty of room to grow very, very large root systems. The plants in the top can actually grow roots from the top all the way to the bottom if they want to. It's easier in the Iharvest since there's really nothing separating the plants and stopping them from going from top to bottom. In the Lettuce Grow Farmstand, there are little dividers in the system, but there's also drainage holes so the roots can go down through that. So most of these systems can grow very, very large roots, which allows you to have very, very large plants with bigger production. The garden system, you only have room for like 3 inches of roots. So it makes it very difficult to grow larger plants like peppers, tomatoes, and cucumbers. Because the small root system, 1, it can't support the plant well. And 2, it has a hard time getting the proper nutrients and water uptake. And also, it doesn't get enough oxygen in the root zone because the roots are so compact in that tiny little space. So plants that grow a big root system will never grow good in the garden system. Plants that do grow well in the garden system are plants that have a shorter life cycle. So the root systems don't have a chance to get humongous. For instance, lettuce, bok choy, tot soy. Some of your small tomato plants do fine. Your cherry tomatoes, but I wouldn't want to grow anything larger than that. If you're trying to grow plants that are too big for the garden system, it's just not they won't produce well. Sometimes from looking at the plants, people are always asking, why do my tomato plants not look good? Why are my pepper plants not looking good? Well, it's because of the roots. The plant just can't get the nutrients that it needs. It's very, very difficult to keep a pepper plant and tomato plants happy over a couple years' time. That's not saying you can't grow these plants in the garden system. It's just more difficult, and don't expect a huge production, and don't expect your plants always to look super healthy if you're trying to grow a big plant in the garden. Also, if you're trying to grow these big plants in the garden system, you better check those roots, especially cucumbers. Man, I'm trying to grow cucumbers in my garden right now. Man, those columns are packed full of chips. It's a mess. And I'm only getting like 1 cucumber per plant at a time. and I'm having dozens and dozens of other cucumbers are just dying. The plant can't support too many cucumber plants at once because the roots are so small. I'd really be better off just growing one cucumber plant in a different system, or in a 5-gallon bucket, or even something like a area garden where it has more space to grow. Well, the next topic is oxygen in the root zone. Why this is important and which system is the best. If the plants don't get enough oxygen in the root zone, they have a hard time being efficient at absorbing the proper amount of water and nutrients. Here's a good example of when a plant is not getting enough oxygen in the root zone. Have you ever had a cucumber plant where it's all wilted? The leaves are just hanging down, didn't look good at all. Almost look kind of soft and soggy. I've done it many times. I've grown cucumbers in a 5-gallon bucket. I fill up the cucumber plant, the water for the cucumber plant, but I fill the water too high. You need to keep some room in there for oxygen so the plant can breathe. When there's no room in there for oxygen, the plant can't breathe, and the plant can't absorb the proper oxygen, nutrients, and it's not efficient, so the plant gets all wilted. I see it quite often in groups, and normally you can tell, yeah, you probably just change out your nutrients and you just filled it too full. So you need to lower it a couple inches. So that shows you how important your oxygen is in your root zone. But can you have too much oxygen in your root zone? What do you think? Absolutely. If there's too much oxygen in your root zone, the roots don't want to grow big to help support the plant, and you need to grow the big roots. So if you have too much oxygen, I mean, you really have to have an awful lot of oxygen in the root zone, between not having a lot of water in the system and a lot of air stones in the bottom supplying air to the roots. So most people will never see these issues unless you're running some high-end system with some extremely strong air pumps and probably a system that's almost totally out of water. And out of the 3 systems, which one has the best and worst oxygen in the root system? The Gardyn system, you're only talking about like an inch of oxygen, not a whole lot. So you got to be careful with that system. Keep up on those root trimming to keep all the roots inside the Y pods. On the 2 units back here, you have unlimited room for oxygen, so you'll never have an issue with oxygen issues. So these 2 both win and tie for best oxygen. The third topic we're going to discuss now is plant spacing and airflow, and a little bit on why that's important. People are always worried about how many plants does a system hold. It's not always the best thing to look at in a system, because if you're growing the wrong plant in the wrong system, it's going to cause you all kinds of issues. That's like trying to take a small air garden that has 9 spaces and trying to grow 9 huge heads of lettuce in it. Ain't gonna happen, not unless you're harvesting every single day. First, we're gonna talk about a couple of different plants on how it affects the spacing and the airflow. Then we're gonna discuss how it affects in each system. As for lettuces, some lettuces are short and compact, like the Rex variety, and some are tall, like the black-eyed Simpson. So when you're planting plants, you really need to know how these plants grow, or you might end up with a big mess. A more firm lettuce, something like romaine, they don't need as much room as a more damper lettuce like a black-eyed Simpson. They're so firm, you don't have to worry about the leaves getting soggy and just getting too much moisture on the leaves. Now I'm going to give you my opinion on which system's best for airflow. We're going to use lettuce for an example because it can be very, very compact, dense. Lettuce, you really need good airflow around it or you're going to be throwing away some lettuce. For the wind, I go for the Gardyn system. Since you have the 3 columns, airflow can come from the front side and the back side, and actually both the sides all the way around. So you're really getting the best airflow with the Gardyn system, and it does really well with lettuce. As for the lettuce grow, it also does great for airflow. It's a real close to the Gardyn system for airflow. You just can't really put one fan on this system to hit the whole unit. So it's a little bit more difficult for if you want to try to have a fan on your system. And this is a part I don't really care for about the Iharvest when growing something like lettuce, because it's like blowing a fan just up against the wall. The air can't really go between the leaves to take the moisture away. So you're having a lot of issues if the Iharvest plants get too large if you're growing the wrong variety. So you really need to be careful with the Iharvest if you're growing a bunch of lettuce in it. It can become a mess. I've done it. And also how the airflow affects the plants, and so does lighting. If the plants are too compact and close together, they're just going to have a hard time getting what they need for lighting. So if they're too full in here, you just can't get the light they need. So that can also be as big an issue as not enough air. When you use the factory lettuce grow lights, at least how it's designed, the plants still get very, very good light with the system. The Gardyn does pretty well with the lights with its system. Besides the 2 outside columns and the outside rows, the outside plant, the corners of the outside plant have a little bit harder time getting the light they need. And now finally, the 4th topic, the last topic, plant support in all 3 systems. Which one you want to start out with? I think we're going to start out with the Iharvest this time. Fantastic plant support. For peppers and tomatoes, works great. Next, we're going to do the lettuce grow system. The one out here don't happen to have light rings on it, but the one in the basement does. If you're using one with light rings, those rings are fantastic for plant supports, for peppers and tomatoes. Works amazing. Now, if you're going to use a DIY system like this, you're going to have to do the aftermarket plant supports, which don't work very well. So for outside, huge plants, it can be done. It's just not fantastic. Actually, none of the 3 systems are fantastic for outside. Actually, this is the only one you can use outside. So you'd have to use a DIY setup where you put a bolt in the top and you have a string coming down to help support the plants. So, but with the light rings with this system, fantastic, absolutely amazing. I also have another video that discusses the advantages and disadvantages between all 3 systems. So if you haven't seen that one, you better check it out before you buy a system. So watch that video. This video will give you a good idea of what you need to buy before you purchase a system. And down in the description down here,